All right. Hello, Catholic YouTube. And yes, just YouTube tonight. I was trying to get the live stream up and running on X, but apparently Elon's just not having it tonight. He's not down for the City of the Immaculata on a Monday night. So anybody that's going to join me is going to join me old school here on YouTube. Let's see here. Oblates 2022. That's a cool intro. I love it. Thank you. You were the first person, I think after a year. I assume you're talking about the waiting room that I have there. The film noir, homage to film noir, I call it, waiting room. I think you're the first person to ever compliment on it. So, you know, I'm a big fan of film noir. What can I say? I just happened to watch. Somehow I missed this movie for my entire life up to this point. The what is it? The Third Man with Orson Welles and that actor that plays in a lot of Orson Welles movies. Fantastic movie. Would recommend it. Don't know how I missed it all this time, but I did. So let's see here. Before I get started today, check out our Patreon channel. Over there right now, what do we got going on? We've got the book club going on. That's going to happen 2 days from now, God willing. I always have to say that when it comes to that channel, because when it comes to my Patreon channel, the book club, because there's been some hiccups. But God willing, we will have that Wednesday. And then I think, actually maybe even today, I was kind of like placing the I's and crossing the T's. I finished up the second part of this series that we're doing on Jews in the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. Let me tell you, folks, this has been a tough one for me to put together. I kind of rock and rolled with those it's almost like 8 hours or something ridiculous of content that I did on Eastern Orthodoxy. That was like the first it was like the launch for my Patreon channel, and getting some paying members to come in and kind of offering them something. That was like 10 years, 15 years of study. Let me put it this way. That was about 5 years of study 10 years ago. All of that information, I just kind of put it all out there. I for a graphic way of putting it, I vomited it all up. All of my information and stuff that I have on Eastern Orthodoxy, 7 videos. I think I said it's like 8 hours almost of content. It's all out on YouTube now, so you guys can see it. And I'm getting a lot of feedback on it, a lot of really positive feedback. A lot of people, I'll say some people, not happy with what I did. But hey, if you're not making somebody angry, you're probably not doing it right. So those are out there. And if you like those, that's kind of what I'm going to be doing over on the Patreon channel. But this one with the Jews in the Middle Ages, I'm getting like one of those done a month at this rate. And it's mainly because it's a trickier subject for me to try to navigate putting together a lecture, getting everything I want into the lectures. So the first one is out. It's over there on Patreon. I think I still only have it for paid members, but you can get it for the lowest tier, which is like $5. But anyways, check that out if you get the chance, if you're interested. What have we got on the menu today? I called it Somebody commented on X with the title. They said, "Rut-row Shaggy, the end of Christianity. How's that for a title? What did he mean by that?" Well, we've been covering modernity now in these Monday lectures for the last several of them, and I plan to continue covering them for the next few months. I have a lot of stuff planned. It's all tied together. There's an arc. There's a theme. I plan for it to take us right on into the summer. The last two lectures that we've looked at up to this point are kind of, well, the first one was like, well, I guess they're both are. They're kind of like meta-narratives. The first one, I was making the case that Vatican II, the Conciliar Council, was a propositional council, giving us as Catholics the framework for how we're going to approach modernity. Last time we were discussing the challenge posed by modern historical critical methods, and a specific one, this Bowerian thesis and its threat to the idea of Christian orthodoxy. Today, we're going to make the case a little bit bolder, a bolder claim that the old world is gone, kaput. It like actually gone. We lost it. Our entire inheritance has been squandered. And what we're seeing now, as especially those of you that watch this channel that are in the West, primarily is what we're focused on. What we're seeing now are the shadows of the old gods. We think it's the old thing. We see in that shadow on the walls of the cave a semblance of the old thing, but I'm going to make the case tonight that it's all gone, all of it. And the reason I feel so confident in saying this is because of what I'm going to blame it on tonight, ideas. And the reason this is because once ideas get out there, once they're introduced into an effect and become the cultural zeitgeist, they can't be taken back. So when Scotus, somebody we're actually fond of on this channel, when Blessed John Duns Scotus, for example, places a new emphasis on the individual that didn't exist before him, this is going to have a ripple down effect. When William of Ockham inserts the nominal categorization of things, one can choose after that to remain a realist, but you can't pretend that nominalism is not now a new potent force in how many humans, I'd argue, in fact, the majority of humans today are going to view the world, whether they realize it or not. And this goes right down the line. When Luther kicks the legs out from the table of religious certainty by challenging the old structures, Luther, mind you, was himself a nominalist. When he introduces into the world an individual nominal forgiveness adjudicated between God and you the individual, without mediation from the church, well, now that cat is out of the bag. So before concepts like the individual, autonomy, consent, and so on, before these ideas are introduced, the world that Westerners would have existed in wouldn't have housed those ideas and the consequences of said ideas. And it wasn't even aware that it didn't house them. Medieval people didn't know that they had to think about black holes or dark matter or microbiomes or bacteria. But once those ideas enter into the common knowledge, you don't get to go back to that primitive age of innocence. So I place the beginning of modernity in the 1490s to the 1530s or so. This is like the transition, largely because of the factors that are taking place at this time in the West. The Moors have just been kicked out of Spain. The houses of Castile and Aragon are united with the marriage of Isabel and Ferdinand. The New World is opened up. Luther has presented his thesis, and then all of Christendom cleaves. And now here we are with this 2020 hindsight. It does appear that from the moment modernity began, that we were on a collision course with Christian Europe's demise. Excuse me, it's like a Greek tragedy. You see the protagonist's fate long before they do, and it's a tough thing to watch. And look, these next few lectures are going to be pretty dark, if I say so myself. Y'all are going to think that I've totally black-pilled, but trust me, here from the outset, I have not taken the black pill. I'm hopeful as always. I'm a Christian. Remember last time, all of these lectures are intentionally placed because we believe, as I made the case for last week, in a providential history. God's hand is at play in history. So there is that. That's my caveat. But I'm also a realist. And I'm not an optimist. I actually don't think that Christians can afford to be optimistic. There's a difference between optimism and hopeful. And we shouldn't sugarcoat reality to make ourselves feel better about the condition that we're in. Sun Tzu, the military general from ancient China, one of the greatest strategists in history, said, "Know thyself and know thine enemy, and you will fight 1,000 battles and never lose." And I live by that adage. We have to be honest about where we are. And it's not good. It's not a good place. But all of this doesn't just come from out of nowhere. We can follow it right down through history. And it's largely due to the introduction of ideas combined with certain events. And I want to be clear here because, and this is something I think that the traditionalists, they're guilty of this a lot. I want to be clear here too, that I'm not making the case that Christianity is in trouble demographically. Catholicism is not in trouble. It's a known fact that there will be more Catholics in the world in the next 100 years than at any other point in history. We're doing fine in terms of raw numbers. Where we're not doing so good is in Christianity's historic homes, the Middle East, Europe. Now, we can't really focus on the Middle East here tonight because that's just way too much to get into. But you should be praying for Christians in the Middle East. They need your prayers. Our intent here, though, tonight is to be focused on Europe and among the people of European heritage. We are not doing well. And in so many ways, the society that we live in now is not a Christian one. In fact, it's barely even a post-Christian one. It's almost a post-Christian world. Do you doubt me? I see someone saying, in the chat. Do you doubt me? Well, just stay tuned because we're going to be going deep into the abyss over the next several lectures. Though I promise you, again, I do have a message of hope on the other end. But I'm going to be taking a different approach than I think probably just about anybody else you're going to find on YouTube or anywhere. And the reality is you don't get to the other end. You don't just get through the other side of the journey without crossing Mordor first. Some of us have to be willing to wade into the darkness, to know thyself, to know thine enemies. It's not an easy task, and that's not what I'm going to... I think if anything, even though I've got several, let's just say, I think 7, 8, 9 lectures planned ahead, I'm still not going to be able to encompass everything that I would want to say about this subject. It's not going to be easy, but I see it as the only way that we could possibly win. But I digress. Back to our trajectory. I guess one of the questions to ask is whether or not all of this was inevitable. I talked about this with a friend of mine. Speaking of Patreon, that interview's on Patreon right now. It'll be on YouTube eventually, but I was talking with him about this, a good professor friend of mine, and others have asked this, and I think it's worth considering. The idea being that inherent in Christianity, hear me out now, inherent in Christianity, and this is a thought experiment, guys. So I'm not like prescribing this as what's really going on. I'm saying just think about this from a thought experiment point of view. The idea is that inherent in Christianity is a progressive revolutionary-ism, I would call it. A revolutionary construct, revolution qua revolution, built into the religion itself. And sure, it may take 1,000 years, it may take 1,500, 1,600 years to get there, but it was inevitable once that ball starts rolling. And I think that's a fair question to ask, and it's possibly even given the history reasonably assumed. If you think about it, right? Christians come along in the early centuries, and what do? They topple the old gods, the false gods. They introduce the idea, well, they reintroduce and reinterpret the idea of secondary causality. Now, once all of the old gods are dead, and there's nowhere else left to go as far as a body of people in Europe, then they turn inward. And they eventually begin to turn on themselves. And what do? They topple the saints. They topple the church hierarchy. And then finally, at a certain point, they begin to topple God himself. Now, this argument says that if not inherent, then it's at least a high risk of extermination built into Christianity of the regicide, right? The beheading of the king, the overthrow actually of the transcendent itself. Christianity comes along and in a sense entirely demystifies the whole world. At least, within Christianity, the argument would be that in its seed form, Christianity, in this particular argument, the religion is such that even from the very beginning, from the earlier days of what the Christians are doing, they're all harbingers of Darwin, of Marx, of Nietzsche. It could only ever lead to nihilism and atheism. Or if you want to take a little bit more of a moderate approach, at the very least, it opens the door for those things. Now, I don't particularly think it's inherent, but I do think there is certainly the high risk factor was there, especially given how history actually plays out. The reason I feel confident in saying that is because in all my favorite periods of history, Christianity lived comfortably alongside the strange, the mythical, honestly, alongside the pagans. Look at the Celts, if you doubt me about that. The entire medieval world is one giant mystical adventure, for lack of a better way of putting it. So I don't think it's actually inherent that Christianity take on this revolutionary form as such. But lowercase r, Reformation, is, in my opinion, inherent in Christianity. Ours is a reforming faith individually. Now, I'm not talking about the uppercase R Reformation, the Reformation as an event. I'm saying Reformation as such. Individually, socially, religiously, Christianity is constantly reevaluating itself. Take, for example, the long road to concepts, to ideas like consent. A thoroughly Christian idea, by the way. I don't think you get the concept of consent in any other worldview that, at least that exists out there today. I'm not saying it's not possible that some other religious worldview could have invented the idea of consent, but you don't get it from what we have out there now and what we had out there historically. You see, as a person who studied the Middle Ages pretty in depthly, you see the idea of consent arising out of centuries of debate, coming at it from multiple angles. The issues of grace and free will, the issue of consent in marriage, all of these are uniquely our own. But then I do think also that there is a point of no return. The point that when Christianity in a particular time and place crosses that line, there's no going back. Because remember, as I said at the beginning, when ideas become present, when the average Joe Schmo out there wraps his mind around some theoretical thing that people, like theologians and canon lawyers, have been arguing about for centuries, when Joe Schmo out there begins to wrap his mind around the idea like consent, you don't go back from that. Now, you may still live in a world that doesn't recognize consent, but you do. And once that idea is there in your mind, and you begin to look around the world at you, and you recognize in various places violations of consent, this is key. We're going to get to that. For me, the point of no return is obvious. I don't think it's William of Ockham. I don't even think it's Descartes. I think it's Luther and the Reformation. Once the power structure of the church had been undermined, once the guardrails have been removed and the reductio to sola scriptura is made, it was only a matter of time. And I think this plays out immediately. And I mean, like, immediately after Luther's ideas are reprinted and passed around. From Danzig to Wittenberg, you begin seeing churches being razed, icons being smashed, the church visible, and the saints begin being toppled. Excuse me. Of course, in the same way that even after Occam introduces the idea of nominalism, the realists don't go away. Well, we're still here. The Catholic Church doesn't go away after Luther, but Humpty Dumpty has been broken. And no matter how much the church tries, we couldn't put it back together again. The old world is gone. The unity of the Middle Ages are fractured forever, never to return. And then what happens? Does history stop? Of course not. It continues to progress. It continues to reform. We get to the Enlightenment. And in the same way that the reformers sought to behead the bishops and the angels, so too did the Enlightenment seek to behead kings and eventually Christ himself, God himself. You guys are probably sick of hearing me talk about the French Revolution, but there's a reason I bring the French Revolution up, because it's actually that important. The world that we live in today, in so many ways, is the result of what happened in that time period, or what happened in the aftermath of it. What did the revolutionaries of the French Revolution seek to do? Remember now, all the way back there in the beginning, Maximilien Robespierre, he changes the calendar. He gets rid of the 7-day week, and he reinstituted the years too. He called it Second Thermidor, the second year of the revolution. The goal being that within a generation, no one would remember when Sunday was, what day Sunday fell on anymore, and therefore we'd be unable to celebrate our Lord's Day. Now, when all was said and done, they didn't manage to destroy Christianity, but they opened the windows and they let the air in, the air of modernity. And who would go on and learn from those lessons? Well, of course, Vladimir Lenin. another favorite of mine to bring up on this channel. Lenin would look back on the lessons of the French Revolution. He would look back on the mistakes of the French Revolution and learned well he did. Lenin said that the error of the French Revolution was that they half-assed it. They didn't go all in. Right? So, for as extreme as it was, and it was deadly traumatic for Europe, are you able to see what happened? I hope you could see here. I see somebody saying they kind of sense a Gnostic flavor in my summary. But I did caveat by saying it's a thought experiment. I'm not giving you my position. I'm kind of walking you through some potential ideas. Oh, that's a good question. We'll save that for later. Save that one for later. Now we know what's possible. The ideas are out there, Lenin says. Oh, wait. We can actually eradicate Christianity from the culture, says Lenin. It is possible. Look at what Robespierre and the Jacobins did. They didn't have the vision. They didn't have the visionary lens to see that it could be done, and they didn't follow through because of that. But we are going to follow through, because the next stage, of course, after the French Revolution, is going to be that of the Marxists. Now, I plan to do a talk about Marx. I'm going to include him in this series next time. I've got the next lecture is called, I think I call it the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. We're going to look at Hegel. We're going to look at Marx, Darwin, and Nietzsche. But suffice it to say here that the Marxists were both militant and exacting in their theories and their praxis about how to gut the remnants of Christianity from society. Why? Because they knew now, oh, we can do this. This is how the French Revolution began it. This is why it's a problem. This is how we could, I mean, you have no idea the extent that these people went to this. Entire social organizations of the left, of the early left, got around to, they met just to discuss undermining the family, undermining parents, undermining fathers, undermining the very fabric of Christian ethics. Groups of Marxists would meet in the living rooms or in coffee houses from Geneva to Paris to New York. They were obsessed with this idea of how to rid society of this thing, Christianity. Now, while your forebears were busy working, while they were busy doing the right thing, these people, they ate, they drank, they slept the death of your faith. And that's a hard thing to combat when you're trying to live your life and you've got a group of people that don't do anything but dedicate themselves to the overthrow of your way of life. That's a very difficult thing to combat. And we're going to be coming back to that theme a lot. So why are they doing this? Because the ideas have been introduced. The French Revolution showed us what was possible. And then you're going to follow that a century later with Alexandra Kollontai, with Rosa Luxemburg presenting the ideas of a society with open sexual mores, where women can have as many lovers as they desire. They don't need men telling them that they should have only one partner that they're committed to. That is repression. Another idea introduced during the French Revolution, the idea of a repressive institutional or social forces. Repression, which has now been expanded at this point, 100 plus years removed from that, basically expanded to mean that, you know, anything that you tell me to do that I don't want to do is now a repressive act, and you are suppressing my freedoms. I just watched a movie the other day from the 1970s by Warren Beatty and Diane Keaton called Reds. It's from sometime in the 1970s. It's about John Reed, who was the author of 10 Days That Shook the World. He was an American journalist, a left-wing journalist, covering the October Revolution in Petrograd and Moscow. Excuse me. And he and his wife, played by Keaton, she is playing Louise Bryant, who would have been Reed's wife. Well, they're going to all of these like smoke-filled coffee house debates. They're in the movie. That's what they're doing. They're debating these ideas. They're actually debating the revolutionary ideals of not being tied down to bourgeois norms like monogamy and marriage. But oh yeah, there's just that one little problem. They get caught up with that pesky little bourgeois hang-up called jealousy when they open their marriage. Anyways, it's a good movie, a bit long, but it covers the Russian Revolution. So, of course, you know I'm there. And it covers it pretty accurately, actually, for those early years. But, yeah, they are head first arguing these ideas. And they're clear. At this point, they're not even really thinking about the French Revolution or the Reformation, or how they're children of those two whores. It's become so ingrained. Hey, Reformation, we overthrow corrupt power structures. Hey, French Revolution, look at how far we could take that concept. We can carve away and cut out the very organs of Christian society and still keep and maintain a functioning society. And this is going to be the thing that we bring up in the lecture following the next lecture that I'm going to do on. No, I've got one in between there. Sometime in the future, we're going to be talking about McIntyre. So there are things, right? There are ideas in your head right now that are a product of Christianity, that are a product of the Reformation, of the Enlightenment, of modernity. And you've never really stopped to consider them because you've just taken the world that you were born into for granted. This is the great lament of philosophers everywhere, that so precious few stop to ever think about thinking. You take these young women prostituting themselves online. They're raking in cash from OnlyFans, selling their bodies, and never once do they stop to think. Never once do they stop to think about a Rosa Luxemburg or a Louise Bryant sitting around in a smoky room 100 years ago, arguing about how to dismantle the patriarchy. But that's why here in the year 2026 that these young ladies have the opportunity to prostitute themselves out to the world instead of starting a family or entering a convent. Now, I know what you're wondering, Brian, how bad is it really, though? Well, that really actually just depends on how far you want to look back. What are you measuring it against, and how far back do you want to go? You take the life of a Celtic Christian in 9th century Ireland. Life may have been harsh. It may have been challenging. But in terms of access to sanctity, to salvation, they had saints and holiness in spades. You couldn't walk down a road in Ireland a few miles without tripping over relics of a saint or a holy well, or running across a scholar monk, or fairies flying away from you, if the tales are to be believed anyways. So what are we comparing to? If we're comparing to that, well, then I say that we're in a pretty bad way. How many people do you pass in a week that's a saint? How many scholar monks do you pass in a week? How many people do you pass in a week that have never once in their life spoken to God? Probably more than you realize. How many people have you passed in your life that have never even considered the fact that they're in need of forgiveness? Luther, Robespierre, Marx, Lenin, Luxembourg, Margaret Sanger, Saul Alinsky, all of these people, whether intentionally or not, have effectively, in my opinion, killed off the old world. The old world is gone. In the same way that Luther killed off the Middle Ages, and we never get the Middle Ages again, you never go back to that time before. Once the door is kicked open, you never get. Once the toothpaste is out of the toothpaste container, it never goes back. It's the same thing with ideas. The old world is gone. It's dead. It's a corpse. When you look at Europe today, you're looking at a corpse. You're not looking at what once was. It can't be, because the people who lived in that world of what once was, again, depending on how far back we go, but I think at this point, even the most generous that I could be of what would constitute a traditional society, 1940s, 1950s, the last, right? At the very least, they remember people. They might have remembered their grandparents or something like that. These people are all gone. Those people that are all gone, by the way, would never have considered the possibility that you could actually topple Christendom. If you go back far enough and ask this 9th century Celtic man or woman that you're running across, that you could topple the church, that you could smash the saints, that you could evacuate God and morality from all levels of society, and that you could convince an increasing majority of people to cheer it all along. The very idea of all of that would have been an impossibility to them. But it's not to you, because you live in it. You know that the French Revolution is possible, because whether you know about the French Revolution or not, you live in its world. You know that Bolshevism happened, because whether or not you know about Bolshevism or not, you live in its world. Bolshevism, I remind you, is even more potent and more lethal than the French Jacobins were, because with Bolshevism, as I've been reiterating on this channel over and over again, driving the point home, they knew what was possible. It was part of their entire framework and structure that their goal was to actually cut out the organs of Christian society and leave. Lenin was pretty radical. He said he was actually willing to kill off 2/3 of the world's population, so long as the remaining third was left was communist. So who knows what that world would have looked like? Pretty dark place for sure. But this is why they so ruthlessly went after Christians, not just in the churches, but in all areas of life. Shall we look at the ways that this is the case? Well, what about their utilitarian ethics? The end justifies the means. The one thing about the Bolsheviks and the modern progressive left is in many ways the heirs of this ideology. That's the cornerstone of their entire ideology. They ultimately can justify any act, immoral or moral, however you want to assume it, because assuming that they would even grant that there is such thing as some kind of objective morality, even if you were to simply say that it was like a nominal thing that you just impose on the world, but simply the way that they're going to judge it is against whether or not it further advances their cause towards their stated goals. And this is the backbone. I'm not saying that the modern left wing here in the United States, fortunately, they're not as smart. They're actually a lot of them are kind of dumb, but they're also not as deadly or potent as those old Bolsheviks were. But they certainly inherited the idea of what makes an act moral is the furtherance of the cause that they are seeking to advance. Whereas before, the old world at least in Christian Europe, everyone was working under the assumption that they were one day going to be answerable to a God of some kind of general, like agreed upon sense of justice. Objective justice to them did exist. And not all actions in the advancement of a goal, whether the goal was good or bad, not all actions in advancement of that goal were permissible. And the society that they lived in took that for granted. We don't. We can't take that for granted because that's not the world that we lived in. How about the fact that there's been, since the Bolsheviks, there's an encouragement of class hatred and even, in a sense, social accelerationism. Lenin said that the worse that things get for society, the better that it gets for the Bolsheviks. Christian ethics, on the other hand, demanded a certain hierarchy where even sacred scripture recognizes the state of master and slave, at least on a temporal level, and the obligations that one has to their superiors. They redefined family away from the patriarchal structure to a communal one where the state has ever more say over you, your wife or husband, your child, and the future, and your future as a family and as a society. They have more say over it than you do. They also, let's not forget, exploit labor and deny wages. I mean, it's a laundry list. And that's just the Bolsheviks, folks. I mean, dear Lord, we haven't even looked at the social revolutionary movements of the 1960s. What have we got there? We've got abortion, enshrined in law, now enshrined in state constitutions. We have pornography, which wasn't even really a concept until modernity, not only accessible, but encouraged, both its consumption and engaging in it, being foisted upon our young women. We have gender roles being deconstructed. We have sexual degeneracy being prioritized. We have maid services being expanded. Are you guys really under the pretense that we live in a Christian or even a post-Christian culture? We live in a post-Christian culture. Do any of you actually think that Europe or America or Australia or any other Western bloc is still Christian? Do you think that if you invited that man back from the 9th century and placed him, let's say you dropped him in San Francisco, named after one of our greatest saints, what do you think he'd say after you caught him up on the technology, but then you walked him around the city and kind of explained everything to him? Do you think he'd recognize even a nominally Christian society? He absolutely not. So what we live in, this is the theme of tonight's lecture. I repeat, it's not the dying body of Christendom. What we live in is the rotting corpse of Christendom. We are Christians living in a post-Christian society. So I told you that it was going to get dark. But now the question remains, can we go back? This is what the traditionalists would like to do, to go back. Well, we are going to look at that. We are going to be assessing Alistair McIntyre's view of whether or not a return, as the young folks say, is even possible, and some of the problems with that. So we got a lot in store for all of this. What was Europe before Christianity? I would ask the question, what is Europe without Christianity? I don't think it's Europe. There was something. There's the Roman Empire. That's certainly something. There's tribal warfare. That's mostly what it is. And then you've got this massive organizational structure known as the Roman Empire sort of supplanted right in the middle of it, going from, Italy up into modern day England. But sans that, I don't think that you have a concept of Europe before Christianity. Europe as such, Napoleon said that every European war is a civil war. And I know what he meant by that, but I think he's taking for granted the thing that actually brings Europe together. And look, I consider myself a student of the Middle Ages. I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I think that's a loaded term when you call yourself an expert in something. But I'm a student of the Middle Ages. I learned from the Middle Ages. I in particular love the High Middle Ages. That's my number one area of interest. And I have thought about this many times. The reason it's my most, it's the area I spend the most time in terms of my interest. The reason that is because I think this is where European identity doesn't just emerge as an idea, it emerges as a fact. Because the High Middle Ages is the one time, and it's not perfect. There's a lot of wars, there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of European Christian rulers undermining other Christian rulers. But it's the closest that we ever come to something that looks like this thing that we call Christendom. Now that thing, that real tangible thing called Christendom, you bracket it here, I would say it consolidates at the very least with the High Middle Ages, and it starts to fracture and break with the beginning of modernity. That living organism called Christendom, that's called Europe, that's what I think is gone. Now, where are we headed? Where is Europe headed in the future? That remains to be seen. Oh. Bolshevism was the manifestation of enmity. I spend this would probably be, I don't know, I'm really enjoying this series on modernity, and it's bothering me how much I enjoy it. Because I think I said this last time, but it's like, I feel I want to be like Mel Gibson in The Patriot. All I want to do is just tend to my little farm. And my little farm is the Middle Ages. It's the Franciscans. It's this little thing that I do. But if you watch The Patriot and Mel Gibson, there's this like one scene where he's like hacking this British soldier to death. And he's like, he enjoys it. He's like, he's taking delight in it. And that's how I feel like when I cover the Middle Ages, where it's like, man, I think I enjoy this more than I should, because the Middle Ages is gnarly. It's rough. It's rough covering the Middle Ages, but I really enjoy, the Middle Ages, modernity. That's how I feel covering modernity, because I actually kind of enjoy covering it. And the Bolsheviks in particular, man, I've talked about that. I did a video called something like The Books That Formed Me or something. And one of the books that I included in there was Lenin's What Is to Be Done. And I bring Lenin up a lot on this channel, and I don't really emphasize why I bring him up so much. Now's as good a time as any to mention it, though. But I see Lenin as one of the great pivotal figures of history, maybe one of the greatest of all time, because he's not just a theorist. He is a theorist, but he's also a very pragmatic man. And I think he touched upon a very dangerous reality. So, for example, I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. You take somebody like Oliver Cromwell, you take somebody like Napoleon Bonaparte, somebody like Stonewall Jackson, Cromwell, Napoleon, Stonewall Jackson, three absolutely brilliant and effective military leaders. But they're not the kind of people that I would seek to emulate, right? Cromwell was a pretty nasty person. Napoleon was the son of the French Revolution, right? There's a lot of things wrong with Napoleon. Jackson's an interesting character, but more like a tragic figure than anything else. But there's like an effectiveness to the way that Oliver Cromwell conducted his military campaigns. There's a huge effectiveness to the way that Napoleon conducted his military campaigns. Same with Stonewall Jackson. And it's like, I see Lenin as that kind of figure. While he didn't lead on the combat field, he saw the flaw, he saw what was like, I think, potentially the fatal flaw in Marxist ideology, which is that it was very, despite the rhetoric of Marx, it was a very passive ideology. And so in the wake of Marx, and these Russians, man, these 1890s, these Russian intellectuals that are Marxist, like the debates that the reason I say that the modern left is kind of dumb, because if you go back and like read the debates that these Marxist intellectuals are having at the turn of the 20th century, like they were dense into like economics and transition of economies, and it was pretty intense, that like tomes that these guys would write and these long like hours that they would spend debating these things in these little like secret living room meetings that they would have and stuff like that. And the whole of the Russian the whole of the Russian Marxist movement, which I think was reflective of Marxism in general up to that point, was very much like Marx taught us that the revolution will come. We just kind of have to be prepared for when it comes. But this is the science. This is the stages of history. This is the Hegelian dialect unfolding over time. So there was a certain passivity sort of included in Marxism. Lenin comes along and says, I don't think so. I don't think this is working, guys. He actually, he had already written What Is to Be Done by 1905. So I think he wrote it like 2-3 years before the 1905 revolution in Russia, where it was like the chance, it was the proto-Russian revolution. The Duma was formed, where they were going to hold like sort of like a congressional parliament system. And there was Jackson was Confederate soldier. Parliamentary system, and the Marxists were kind of caught like off guard. They were like, oh wait, we weren't expecting a revolution to start, so they weren't there to seize it. Lenin had already written What Is to Be Done a few years before, and he's the one that's like driving the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks actually is formed, it's a splinter group of Marxists. There was the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. The Mensheviks wanted to actually work more within the parliamentary system that had developed after 1905. Lenin and the Bolsheviks were the extreme that wasn't actually willing to work. They were going to work with the parliamentary system in order to try to get in there and undermine it and overthrow it. But again, that's the pragmatism of Lenin's approach to politics, which is, look, at the parliamentary system, if we can use it to get ourselves elected, and then we'll destroy the parliamentary system. Fine, then we'll do that. But he kind of quickly saw that he would never be able to hold an actual majority long enough to seize that kind of power. So he sort of discarded it eventually. And he kept this hard line, like he was the extreme left of the leftist revolutionaries. And that was, I think, the pivotal thing. Now, I think maybe you're probably asking like more of like a general, like I guess, manifestation of enmity here, sort of like a general approach. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent here about it, but I wanted to express this to you guys because I've meant to let you know why I bring up Marx so often and why I think he's such a pivotal Lenin, why I bring Lenin up and why I think he's such a pivotal player, because his approach is actually when it's applied, it's almost unstoppable. Fortunately, I don't think there's many Leninists out there right now, but that doesn't mean that they're not. Doesn't mean that that they won't return. It's that old Dead Kennedy song from the 80s that says, "The hippies won't come back, you say. Well, just you wait." Well, the Bolsheviks won't come back, you say, but just you wait. That's one of my fears, is that somebody one day, the right person, is going to stumble upon Lenin. They're going to read it and they're going to realize actually what a gift it is if you were to follow it. I actually think, oh, do I want to go here or do I want to save it? I think I want to save it. I have a solution, my own particular thoughts on some of this stuff. But we're going to save solutions till later. The only thing I will tell you is that for Lenin explicitly said by any means necessary. But there was another person that said by any means necessary, and that was Saint Maximilian Kolbe. But Saint Maximilian Kolbe had a very important qualifier in his way of saying it. He said by any legitimate means necessary. And he also said to Our Lady by any legitimate means necessary. But I think we would be wise to actually ourselves adopt something of I'm not saying the core of Leninism, but something of that type of I would almost call it like a Joan of Arc dedication to our cause. But I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Lenin was the brains and Trotsky was, Trotsky thought he was the brains. He thought he was the brawn. He thought he was the man. Trotsky actually, I think, he capitulated to Lenin because he knew that Lenin was a superior in terms of winning the affection of the party. But Trotsky, I think, clearly thought he was the smartest guy in the room. He was an interesting person. He did lead the front lines. He led the Red Army during the Russian Civil War. So I would say he's the brawn in that sense. But he was also a theorist. I have actually quite a few books by Trotsky. I always found the Stalin-Trotsky divide pretty fascinating. I think if anybody was probably the bronze, that was just the bronze and not so much the brain. It was probably Stalin. But I would be getting too far afield if we went to that. So anyways, guys, that's all I got for you today. We're going to come back next time. It's called Hegel, Darwin, Marx, Nietzsche, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And it's going to be a continuation kind of what we've been talking about tonight. But I hope I gave you guys something to think about tonight. Thank you so much. I'm glad you've been enjoying them. And hopefully it's not too, again, I want you guys to, the message that we're taking away from all of this stuff, I don't want you to get despairing. Never despair, right? Never swallow the black pill. The black pill is on the table. It's tempting. We're looking at it from all angles, but you never take the black pill. We have Christ. God's hand is working through history. We're going to get there, but it's going to take some time. And next time we're going to be going deeper into if you're doubting me still that the old world is dead and we live in a different world today, then wait till we walk through some of these, what I call are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So I think you guys are going to like it. I will see you then. God bless. Take care.
Honey, their coffee can't hold a candle to yours.
Instant Folgers taste good as fresh perked.
This is Earth, the year 2100. This is the headquarters of Space Patrol, and men from Earth, Mars, and Venus live and work there as guardians of peace.
In the nation's capital, President Johnson today welcomed British Prime Minister Douglas Hume.